The war in Ukraine unfolds across two main theaters, each uniquely shaping the conflict's trajectory and strategic dynamics, and together presenting a complex, multifaceted battlefield that reflects both traditional and modern forms of warfare. The first, the ground war, involves hundreds of thousands of troops arrayed along a roughly 1,000-mile front that stretches from the heavily forested northern regions through vast steppe landscapes in the south, across dense urban centers like Dnipro, and over critical river crossings such as the Dnipro. Each of these terrains imposes distinct tactical challenges for maneuver, defense, and supply lines, demanding a blend of conventional and adaptive strategies. The front line is characterized by slow, grinding attrition warfare where both sides have established deeply entrenched positions, reinforced by extensive networks of trenches, bunkers, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles, reflecting a static but deadly stalemate reminiscent of early 20th century conflicts yet complicated by modern technology. Logistics here remain a constant challenge, with supply convoys vulnerable to artillery shelling, drone reconnaissance, and guerrilla raids, all under the ever-present threat of artillery barrages, missile strikes, and air attacks that disrupt movement and resupply efforts. The fighting involves relentless combined arms warfare, integrating infantry units, armored formations, artillery batteries, combat engineers, and air support in coordinated assaults or defensive operations. This includes prolonged artillery bombardments designed to wear down enemy fortifications, infantry skirmishes aimed at capturing or denying tactical points, large-scale offensives to seize key terrain features such as hills or urban districts, and armored clashes where tanks and mechanized infantry vie for control. The extensive use of mines and layered fortifications has caused heavy casualties on both sides and contributed to widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure, exacerbating an already dire humanitarian crisis marked by displaced populations, shortages of food and medical supplies, and the collapse of essential services in frontline regions. Meanwhile, the second theater, the air war, is less visible to the public eye yet strategically vital, marked by rapid technological innovation, tactical adaptation, and an ongoing arms race in unmanned and electronic warfare systems. Both combatants conduct near-nightly bombardments employing long-range crews and ballistic missiles capable of striking deep behind enemy lines, alongside a growing fleet of advanced drones used for reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and precision-guided strikes that target command centers, air defense systems, and critical infrastructure. Sophisticated jamming and counter-jamming systems are deployed to degrade enemy communications and sensor networks, creating a constantly shifting electronic battlefield. This aerial campaign aims to systematically degrade military infrastructure, industrial production bases, and command and control hubs to disrupt enemy supply chains and reinforcements, forcing substantial resource allocation to air defense measures and complicating strategic planning. By 2025, Ukraine significantly intensified its air strikes deep into Russian-held territory, demonstrating a growing capability to challenge Russian air dominance through approximately 132 strikes that year alone. These attacks targeted military-industrial complexes, forward air bases, and key logistics hubs, signaling a strategic shift toward offensive air operations designed to undermine Russia's ability to sustain frontline forces. A pivotal moment occurred during Operation Spiderweb on June 1, 2025, when Ukrainian forces deployed AI-enabled drone swarms that simultaneously assaulted multiple Russian air bases, inflicting damage on strategic bombers and undermining Russian air power. Additional precision strikes focused on critical logistics nodes such as the Kansk Air Base and weapon manufacturing centers, including the Kronstadt plant, disrupting the production and deployment of advanced armaments. This combined aerial and ground campaign underscores Ukraine's evolving focus on achieving air superiority as a decisive factor that could shape the overall outcome of the conflict. The interplay between the attritional ground war and the high-tech air war reflects the evolution of modern warfare, where control of the skies directly influences ground operations, logistical sustainability, troop morale, and the flow of international military aid and political support. Consequently, air power has become a core component of Ukraine's strategic doctrine, with implications extending beyond the immediate battlefield to broader geopolitical alignments and military doctrines worldwide, as nations observe and adapt to the lessons emerging from this multifaceted conflict. On the same night in the same city, Ukrainian special purpose units, they launched a highly coordinated and meticulously planned strike on the Radula plant, a crucial industrial facility deeply embedded in the Russian military-industrial complex, widely recognized for producing advanced and sophisticated Russian cruise missiles. These missile types are not only emblematic of Russia's offensive capabilities, but have also been extensively deployed in multiple conflict zones, where they pose significant and ongoing threats to Ukrainian and allied forces, making the Radula plant a front. The operation was strategically timed during the late hours to maximize the element of surprise and to disrupt missile production cycles effectively, all while minimizing the risk of Ukrainian personnel exposure to hostile countermeasures and retaliatory strikes, which underscores the operation's blend of operational precision, tactical prudence, and a deep understanding of enemy. Simultaneously, the strike was synchronized with an equally precise UAV assault on the Angster plant located in Moscow, a vital manufacturing hub responsible for producing essential microelectronics that are critical to the functionality of Russian military systems, including advanced air defense networks, electronic warfare suites, and missile guidance technologies, thus targeting the very backbone of Russia's defense capabilities. This dual-pronged attack not only demonstrated Ukraine's enhanced long-range strike capabilities, but also highlighted their ability to combine refined intelligence gathering, cutting-edge electronic warfare tactics, and stealth UAV technology to penetrate deep into heavily fortified and tightly secured enemy installations, effectively crippling key components of Russia's military-industrial infrastructure. Following this, on July 26th, Ukrainian drones targeted a defense manufacturing plant in Stavropol, which was directly involved in producing sophisticated electronic warfare equipment vital for Russia's electromagnetic control capabilities on the battlefield. This strike successfully degraded Russian command and control effectiveness across multiple operational fronts, thereby hindering their ability to coordinate complex maneuvers, maintain battlefield superiority, and effectively respond to rapidly evolving combat situations. Beyond targeting manufacturing centers, Ukrainian forces have launched an extensive and multifaceted campaign against Russian logistics infrastructure, focusing on critical nodes such as electrical substations, supply depots, seaports, and expansive rail networks that are indispensable for the timely and efficient transport of fuel, ammunition. These attacks have caused widespread power outages in key regions, including Belgorod, severely disrupting both civilian life and military operations. As the resulting loss of electrical power impacted crucial communication systems, radar installations, thereby compounding the operational challenges faced by Russian forces. Notably, on October 31st, Ukrainian forces employed Neptune anti-ship missiles to strike key power generation facilities, resulting in further destabilization of the electrical grid and compounding the logistical difficulties encountered by Russian units. In addition, Ukrainian sabotage efforts targeting rail infrastructure included a significant disruption on the strategically vital Trans-Siberian Railway, delaying the movement of critical supplies, complicating Russian attempts to reinforce their positions, and undermining the overall logistical coherence of their military operations. Fuel trains en route to Crimea were specifically targeted to reduce the peninsula's reserves, thereby limiting Russian operational flexibility and sustainability in the region. Ukrainian strikes also extended to maritime targets, with coordinated attacks on ports along the Black Sea and Sea of Azov, culminating in a high-profile drone attack on Terek Port's oil storage tanks on Christmas Day, which ignited massive fires and caused extensive damage, further degrading Russia's critical fuel supply chain and impeding its naval and ground operations. Collectively, these coordinated operations represent a comprehensive and strategically sophisticated Ukrainian campaign aimed at systematically degrading Russia's military-industrial base and logistical networks, signaling a significant shift in the power prowess. In context, 6 weeks earlier, a Ukrainian drone attack targeted an oil depot and a civilian vessel at Novaros port near Krasnodar Krai, briefly disrupting oil exports from Russia's largest Black Sea terminal, a critical choke point for the country's energy export infrastructure. These precise and calculated strikes on Russian energy infrastructure form a crucial component of Ukraine's broader strategy of long-range, multi-domain attacks designed to systematically degrade Russia's energy supply chains and export revenue. Russia vital. Waffen news, which are vital. According to the Comprehensive 2025 United 24 report, Ukrainian forces have conducted a series of sustained and targeted attacks, documenting 88 strikes on oil refineries, 28 on storage facilities, and 6 on gas infrastructure installations. This sustained campaign underscores a deliberate and methodical approach to eroding Russia's energy export capabilities, aiming to inflict maximum disruption to the flow of fuel and related resources. For instance, on October 21st, the Maritime refinery in Dagestan was heavily damaged in a coordinated strike, significantly impacting fuel supplies to the Russian Caspian fleet, which forms a key component of Moscow's naval power and maritime control in the Caspian Sea basin. Furthermore, on December 14th, Ukraine launched synchronized attacks against multiple energy targets, including the Aski refinery, the Yuruinsk oil depot, and the Slavonefianos refinery. These operations demonstrated Ukraine's increasing operational sophistication and capacity to execute complex multi-target strikes that degrade critical nodes of Russia's energy infrastructure simultaneously, amplifying the overall impact and complicating Russian repair and defense efforts. The campaign escalated on Christmas Day when advanced Storm Shadow cruise missiles were employed to strike the Triuk fuel reservoir and the Novosakhtinsk refinery, striking at pivotal fuel storage and distribution points. These attacks disrupted both military logistics and civilian supply chains at critical junctures, showcasing a strategic blend of precision and time. Notably, Ukrainian forces have also focused on disrupting the clandestine Shadow Fleet, a covert network of Russian oil tankers used to transport oil surreptitiously in an effort to evade Western sanctions. At least 11 tankers within this fleet have suffered critical damage from drone strikes or mysterious explosions, severely disrupting maritime oil routes and complicating Russian efforts to maintain its export volumes. While the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, has claimed responsibility for some of these attacks, it has deliberately maintained ambiguity about others, a tactic designed to preserve operational security, sow uncertainty, and exert psychological pressure on Russian authorities. This maritime sabotage campaign began in late December 24 with the sinking of the Ursa Major in the Mediterranean Sea, a pivotal moment marking a new and intensified phase in Ukraine's maritime offensive. The attacks have since continued into 2025, with significant damage inflicted on vessels such as the Sea Charm near Turkey, the Grace Farum off the coast of Libya, the Siege near Italy's Savona port, and the Koala in Russia's Baltic port of Laga, demonstrating an extensive geographic reach that spans multiple strategic maritime regions. Experts analyzing these incidents suspect the use of limpet mines, highlighting Ukraine's tactical sophistication and the deployment of specialized sabotage teams capable of conducting covert underwater operations. In addition, Ukraine has made significant advancements in naval drone technologies, enabling precision strikes on maritime targets far from shore and helping to offset traditional naval imbalances in the Black Sea and beyond. For example, in June, the Villamura tanker exploded off the coast of Libya, necessitating emergency repairs in Greece and causing disruption to vital shipments. While on July 6, the Eco-Wizard tanker suffered two separate explosions that further hindered Russia's maritime oil transport network. Later, on November 27th, the Panama flag Mersin was severely damaged off Senegal after suffering 4 explosions that flooded its engine room, forcing an evacuation and underscoring the truly global scope of Ukraine's maritime sabotage campaign. This escalating and increasingly sophisticated campaign reflects Ukraine's growing expertise and strategic focus on maritime sabotage operations aimed at crippling Russia's oil Although Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility for the recent attacks, and naval authorities have denied the involvement of naval drones, the events that followed strongly suggest that Ukrainian naval drones, particularly the newly deployed Sea Babies maritime drones, were likely responsible for these strikes. In November 2024, Ukraine's Security Service, SBU, began openly using Sea Babies to target Russian commercial vessels, damaging 3 Shadow Fleet tankers in the Black Sea during attacks for which Ukraine claimed responsibility on November 28 and December 10. These attacks were subsequently followed by an aerial drone strike on a tanker in the Mediterranean on December 19th, marking the first overt and deliberate assaults on commercial shipping in the ongoing conflict. Altogether, these coordinated strikes have increased the number of Shadow Fleet tankers either completely disabled or heavily damaged by Ukraine in 2025 to at least 11, including 8 crude oil carriers, representing a significant escalation in Ukraine's maritime offensive capabilities. Here at the Military Show, we rigorously collect, analyze, and compile such data into state-of-the-art analysis every day to keep you informed about the real dynamics of warfare. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now to stay updated. The destruction of these tankers inflicts a significant financial setback on Russia, undermining both its naval logistics and its broader economic resilience. While many of the tankers in the Russian Shadow Fleet are relatively old, averaging about 15 years, replacing a single vessel is estimated to cost approximately $59, not including the time and complexity involved in commissioning new ships. Given current oil prices, the loss of a tanker carrying around 2 million barrels of Russian Urals crude oil amounts to over $200 million in value lost per shipment, a substantial economic hit that compounds with each successful strike. According to S&P Global, as of September 2025, Russia's Shadow Fleet consisted of 978 tankers with a combined deadweight tonnage exceeding 27,000, representing about 127 million deadweight tons, or roughly 18.5% of the global oil tanker fleet, making it a critical artery for Russia's energy exports. On the surface, Ukraine still faces a long road before it can significantly disrupt this fleet. However, not all tankers operate equally. The majority of those targeted by Ukraine appear to belong to a smaller subset of vessels that make frequent Russian port calls annually, identified by the Kiel School of Economics as the core of Russia's shadow fleet, which are vital to sustaining the flow of Russian oil to global markets. If this assessment holds true, the tankers damaged or disabled over the past year could account for up to 10% of this core fleet, which would be a notably impactful economic blow with ripple effects across the global energy supply chain. The consequences of these attacks extend beyond the direct losses to physical assets. Insurance markets reacted sharply, with rates for vessels operating in the Black Sea surging by as much as 300% in early December and doubling again in January, reflecting heightened risk perceptions and driving up the cost of maritime transportation. Russian seaborne crude exports through the Black Sea have plummeted by 30%, significantly curtailing Russia's ability to generate foreign currency. Furthermore, Besiktas Shipping, one of Turkey's largest tanker operators, which includes the Mersin and several other vessels sanctioned by Ukraine, announced it will cease transporting Russian cargoes following the attack on the Mersin, citing unacceptable risks to vessels and crew, thereby shrinking the pool of willing commercial shipping. In essence, it has become significantly more hazardous and costly for Russia to export its oil, severely constraining its economic lifelines. This is precisely the intent behind these strikes, which former SBU chief Vasil Malik famously labeled kinetic sanctions, aimed at starving Russia's war machine by cutting off its revenue streams from oil and gas exports. As recently as a decade ago, the Russian economy was heavily reliant on energy export revenues, leading the late U.S. Senator John McCain in 2014 to characterize Russia as a gas station, masquerading as a country, a phrase that captured the essence of Russia's dependence on hydrocarbon export. Other commentators, including futurist Yuval Noah Harari, U.S. Representative Denny Heck, and former EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, have expanded on this idea, describing Russia as a gas station with nukes or similar variations, emphasizing the paradox of a heavily militarized state so dependent on a single economic sector. In the mid-2010s, up to half of Russian state revenue was derived from oil and gas exports, underscoring the strategic importance of disrupting these flows as a means to weaken Russia's geopolitical influence and military capabilities over the long term. The ongoing attacks on the Shadow Fleet thus represent a carefully calibrated strategy that combines military innovation with economic warfare, leveraging advanced drone technology to inflict disproportionate damage on a critical component of Russia's energy export infrastructure, and revealing how modern conflicts increasingly blur the lines between conventional combat and. Over the years, Russia has steadily reduced its reliance on oil and gas revenues by diversifying its economy to mitigate vulnerabilities stemming from the volatile and often unpredictable fluctuations in global energy markets, as well as the complex geopolitical pressures that intermittently arise due to international sanctions, trade restrictions, and shifting alliances. This strategic economic restructuring has been a key part of Moscow's long-term plan to create a more resilient and self-sustaining economic framework, less susceptible to external shocks. By 2024, oil and gas revenues amounted to approximately 11.1 trillion rubles, around $120.30 billion, which represented about 30% of the federal budget, a significant decline of 60% compared to figures from over a decade ago. This decline is indicative not only of lower global energy prices and production challenges, but also of deliberate policy choices to bolster other sectors, such as advanced technology, precision agriculture, even digital services, even digital. These efforts include substantial government investment in innovation hubs, modernization of industrial complexes, and incentives for foreign and domestic private sector participation, aiming to reduce Russia's economic dependence on hydrocarbons. Despite these diversification efforts, the defense sector remains a dominant expenditure priority. In 2025, Russia's defense budget was officially set at 13.5 trillion rubles, $177 billion, though independent estimates suggest that the total military and security spending, including classified projects and off-budget allocations, may have reached as high as 16.8 trillion rubles, $220 billion. This represents an almost 70% surge in spending compared to the previous year, underscoring Moscow's prioritization of military readiness and strategic security in the face of ongoing conflict and geopolitical tensions, even as economic constraints tighten. The sheer scale of military expenditure illustrates the Kremlin's commitment to sustaining its military operations and defense posture, which is particularly significant given the broader economic pressures it faces. Crucially, oil revenues alone are insufficient to cover the mounting costs of the conflict in Ukraine. As a result, Russia has been compelled to shift its war financing strategy toward increased reliance on domestic taxation, greater borrowing from both internal and external sources, and expanding exports in non-energy sectors to generate additional revenue streams. This shift reflects a more complex fiscal balancing act amid international sanctions and declining energy income. Compounding these financial strains are the direct effects of Ukrainian military strikes, which in 2025 inflicted over $13 in damages on Russia's oil sector, starkly exposing vulnerabilities in the country's energy infrastructure. The direct damages from attacks targeting oil and gas facilities alone exceeded 100 billion rubles, $1.30 billion. While the aggregate costs, including operational disruptions, lost production, and increased security expenditures, topped 1 trillion rubles. These attacks have led to a precipitous drop in pipeline crude deliveries to refineries, reaching a 15-year low, and causing a 1.7% decline in refining output, which in turn has disrupted domestic fuel supplies and export commitments. The operational challenges are further exacerbated by a surge in insurance claims related to terrorism and sabotage, with payouts outstripping premium collections and loss ratios increasing tenfold, placing considerable strain on the insurance sector and driving up overall risk management costs for energy companies. Average individual losses from refinery attacks have ranged between $5 million and $10 million, significantly increasing the financial burden on the energy sector and complicating efforts to maintain stable production levels. Collectively, these factors demonstrate the growing effectiveness of kinetic sanctions, the use of targeted military strikes to degrade critical infrastructure, and reveal how Ukraine has gained a tactical upper hand by systematically undermining Russia's energy infrastructure and financial resilience. The combined impact of Western economic sanctions and Ukrainian military operations has pushed Russia to a critical tipping point, constraining its capacity to finance the war and eroding domestic political support for prolonged conflict. Nevertheless, Russia's retaliatory strikes, which often outnumber Ukrainian bombardments, escalated sharply in late 2025 following the Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil infrastructure that triggered fuel shortages and sparked notable public dissatisfaction within Russia. Over the course of 2025, Russia launched approximately 2,400 missiles and over 100,000 drones, maintaining persistent pressure on Ukrainian infrastructure and thereby influencing the conflict's strategic and diplomatic dynamics. This intense exchange of military actions highlights the evolving nature of the conflict and underscores the interplay between economic vulnerabilities, military strategy, and geopolitical calculations on both sides as they navigate a complex and protracted confrontation. Both sides have consistently claimed interception rates exceeding 90%, which suggests that approximately 10,000 Russian long-range drones and 240 missiles successfully struck targets over the course of the year. These figures are quite sobering when compared to Ukrainian statistics, especially considering Russia's much larger size relative to Ukraine. Not only is Russia delivering significantly more strikes, but the fact that it has 3 times the population and infrastructure spread across an extensive territory makes it substantially harder for Ukraine to inflict any meaningful or lasting damage. Due to strict Russian censorship regarding the outcomes of strikes within Ukraine, obtaining an accurate assessment of the damage caused by the hundreds of attacks on Ukrainian military infrastructure, an area Russia claims as its military-industrial complex, is extremely difficult. However, the secrecy surrounding Ukrainian drone manufacturing, conducted under extreme confidentiality due to fears of Russian attacks, speaks volumes in itself. In stark contrast, Russian drone factories like Kronstadt and Alabuga are openly visible to Ukrainian drone operators, often targeted precisely because their locations are well known and unhidden, which underscores the asymmetry in operational security and strategic vulnerability. While the precise extent of military damage remains uncertain, the worsening humanitarian crisis resulting from relentless Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure amid harsh winters, with temperatures frequently dropping below 14 °F, is undeniable and increasingly catastrophic. By January 2026, Ukraine's available power generation capacity had plummeted from 33.7 GBU to around 14 GBU, roughly one-third of pre-invasion levels, including the destruction of 90% of thermal power plants, damage to 50% of 40% of them, leading to widespread blackouts and severely. The long-term reconstruction costs for the energy sector are already estimated at $68 billion, yet nightly strikes continue without pause, further delaying recovery efforts and deepening economic instability. Consequently, basic utilities such as electricity, heating, running water, and sewage systems have become luxuries for the majority of ordinary Ukrainians, forcing a significant portion of the population to adapt to life without these essentials. In Kyiv alone, over 600,000 residents, about 1 in 5, have reportedly responded to Mayor Vitaly Klitschko's call to leave the city for the winter, seeking refuge in less affected areas or abroad. Emergency power rationing has been in effect nationwide for weeks, with most regions experiencing only about 4 hours of electricity daily, if that, making it nearly impossible for hospitals, schools, and businesses to operate normally. Under such conditions, maintaining even a semblance of economic stability, let alone a comfortable living standard, is incredibly challenging. Millions of urban residents across Ukraine have endured days without heat, leading to frozen sewage pipes in many buildings, which has not only caused severe sanitation problems, but also increased health risks, particularly for vulnerable populations such as the elderly and children. This dire situation has forced some people to resort to desperate measures such as using cat litter for sanitation, a grim indication of the breakdown in basic services. As Maxim Bukmato of the Desnyansky District State Administration bluntly put it, it's unpleasant, humiliating, and un-European. Digging holes, installing portable toilets, using plastic bags and cat litter. but you have to survive. Pipes are already bursting in Holashevsky, and sewage is pouring out of windows, highlighting the stark reality faced by many. Reflecting growing frustration, protests against power outages have increased, and Ukrainian Telegram channels are filled with comments questioning the wisdom of escalating long-range attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, given the severe consequences for Ukrainian civilians, sparking debates about the balance between military objectives and humanitarian costs. Meanwhile, Russians, except perhaps those in Belgorod, where border communities have experienced some disruption, are not experiencing the same level of disruption from the air war, which raises complex questions about the effectiveness and equity of the ongoing conflict's strategic approaches. This raises pressing questions. Will economic and kinetic sanctions combined with military stalemate bring Russia down by 2026, as some have speculated? Or will a plight of freezing Ukrainians, armed with bags of used cat litter, ultimately pressure the Ukrainian government into a disadvantageous resolution to the conflict? Illustrating the tragic human cost of prolonged warfare and the limits of endurance for both nations involved. Subscribe to this channel to stay updated on the latest developments and ensure you don't miss any important updates. Thank you for watching.